So we will just start with a little intro, and then we're going to get Grant and Matt to have a bit of a chat to us about the terrain on the weekend. Let's put this in a PowerPoint because it's easier to follow.
Oh, that's very pretty, Brody. Well done.
Yeah, I like that background. All right.
Kitchen tiles.
Tash, do you want me to go through this, or do you want to go through it?
Well, you can actually go through it, but I was just going to say, wasn't it good for all those that were at Melbourne Sprint Weekend? It was so good to be there and such a fun weekend. And I don't know that any of the sort of organisers are on or course setters, but thanks to everybody. It was good. It's good to be back racing.
Yeah, no, it was definitely a good set of races, and I think the knockout, well, from my perspective, as the course setter and new Tash, that was a bit of a success. I think that it worked out quite well. So that was a fun little extra day as well, and hopefully gave people some practice for the knockout that will be later in the season, actually as a NOL race. So yeah, that'll be interesting. So I'll just run through these quickly. So we're still looking for 2 people for the OA Athletes Commission. If you're interested, please get in touch. I'll probably have a chat to a few people on the weekend, but please send through an email or just a message is fine. We've got a few more people, but we want to make that a full complement. So we'll accept anyone who's interested until the 3rd, and hopefully we'll have something happening within the next month with that as well. So Easter general entries have closed, but the late entries are open till the 8th of April. So if you haven't entered, make sure you enter. You've got a couple of weeks, but better to get it in now rather than forget. And if you have already entered or you're yet to enter, make sure you enter as your NOL team if you are competing for them, by selecting whatever state it is that you are as your club. And not the Orienteering New South Wales, the New South Wales Stingers. That version is the one we're looking for. So please do that for your entries for Easter. We're hoping that the athletes can do that from now on. And the more that you sort of get into the habit of doing it, the more it will become automatic for NOLs. Tash, were you going to say something?
I was just going to say, I think the Gold Coast Sprint Weekend have extended their entry dates, but yeah, just check that. Yeah,
check it out on event, or maybe their general entries they extended a little bit.
Yeah.
And a reminder that you might want to start thinking about this now, which is why we're bringing it up, that the NOL Sprint Relay will be at night, so that you'll probably want a headlamp for that one. So yeah, have a look around if you don't have one. Wildfire Sports have a good selection. They are a sponsor of the NOL, so we do like to support them. So if you want to check out their website, if you have any questions, you can shoot them through to Brendan or one of the Greys, and I'm sure they can help you out. And also on that note, for the last NOL round, there will be the season presentation / social night on Sunday, the 24th of April. So if you're wanting to come along to that, don't go home till Monday if you haven't already booked your flights. Monday is a public holiday, so we're hoping that most people won't have to go to work because it's Anzac Day. So yeah, we're hosting that on the 24th, so it'll be after the last race. So hopefully we can get everyone to come along to that, and there'll be more information about that coming soon, but we just want people to be aware of when it's on.
Yeah, so we haven't decided whether that will be a ticket event that you need to pre-purchase on event or something, but once I'd
say it likely will though. Do you reckon, Tash, based off what we're investigating? I think it probably will be a ticket event that we get people to pre-purchase.
Yeah.
Compared to last year where it was people sort of turned up and you bought your own meal, the options that we have are more likely going to be ones where we have sort of a set price, but we're trying to make it an affordable cost for everyone. So we are looking into that. There's been a couple of instances of people's SIAs going flat. So always make sure you check before the race. And I know at Melbourne Sprint Weekend, they had that sort of that extra check that you could do at the Rego. I'm not sure if that will be, that'll be a thing at the upcoming NOL events, but just make sure that, you're aware of the the possibility of that happening. If it does go flat on beacon mode, I believe it still punches in manual mode. So you just have to swap back to manual punching.
Yeah, it does. So just have that in. I know there's plenty going on in your mind when you're actually out there racing, but just have it in your mind that if it stops beeping, you just need to manually, dibber it. So
and there should be the battery check at the start. So hopefully that picks up on everyone if they are getting it. And the last note is just about World Cup round 1 is at the end of May. If you're interested, get in contact with Tash, and she'll sort of help facilitate that with Frederick and Brett and whoever else needs to be involved. But it doesn't have to be too formal. Just have a chat to Tash maybe over the weekend or send her a message, and we can make the more formalized things after the initial interest.
Yep.
All right. That takes us into this round. So we'll talk about the terrain in a bit of detail in a moment. Grant's going to go through the middle distance terrain for us, and Matt's going to go through the long distance terrain for us. But just a few notes, and this stuff should be in the bulletin as well. It's going to be published in, I think, very soon. The previous maps are up on Eventor now. So if you go to the event page for each event, there should be a few different maps for each of the 2 races. Start times, they will be from 2 p.m. on the Saturday, random draw for the elites for the NOL classes. Sunday, 9:30 via reverse ranking order. And the organisers just wanted to let you know about a few extra things. So it's 1 kilometre to the start on the Saturday, and it's 1.6 kilometres to the start on the Sunday. So particularly for those people who are starting around 9:30, just make sure you factor that into your plan, that is sort of a lengthy-ish distance to the start. In regards to water, the ACT is still sort of trying to minimise having water out at events, and especially with the most recent sort of increases in COVID cases in various places. They don't want this event to become a super spreader. So one of the things they're doing is sort of avoiding the water, and we're all sort of accustomed to this now. So just make sure that you're bringing your water to the events for before and after. So the middle distance, there'll be none before, none after, none on the courses. There usually isn't on a middle distance anyway, but there won't be any on the courses. For the long distance, however, there will be water on the course if you're on course 1 to 4. So I think that covers the elite classes, not the sport classes. The sport classes will be 5 to 13. So course 1 will have 2 water controls. Courses 2, 3, and 4 will have 1 water control, and no water controls on 5 to 13. So I think particularly that affects the sport class. So just consider whether you want to carry your own water or if you're happy with the distance. It is potentially going to be warm, I think. Anyone who's not comfortable using the water should carry their own water. So consider that as well when you're planning.
And I think also that just means if it is, like they said, cups and the bottle, like, traditional, just be a bit mindful of, don't just grab any old cup, and just be mindful of the cup you're drinking out of and where you put it, I guess.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they'll be putting, they didn't, Bob hadn't put anything in the note about having hand sanitizer at the control, but I imagine that's something that they might do as well, and I might recommend to Bob if it's not too hard to add that to the water control.
Exactly. So
if there is hand sanitizer, use it.
Yeah. Yes, please. And can I just before Grant and Matt start, also I asked Jo Allison to jump on, and Jo is one of our high performance squad leaders. So, and she was just going to be there as our backup, but just also to give her a few local tips on the 2 maps, so she can perhaps jump in at the end and if there's anything that she can think of.
Thanks, Jo. Yeah, that'd be good.
Everybody.
All right, there's one more thing. So there'll be a little bit of a social event. It's pretty low key this round, but we wanted to try and do something. So I've made a small booking. I think it's about 30 people at Capital City Brewing Company, 6:15 p.m. on the Saturday. but the venue only takes 50% bookings, so there's 50% walk-in. So hopefully that means if there's more than 30 people that want to go, you should be able to walk in with no issue. So yeah, if you want to, you're more than welcome. Come along, have a drink. I tried to make it early-ish so that you could go on and have your own dinner if you wanted. There is food. There's a permanent food truck. It's a burger food truck. So if that's something that you want to eat, then there's food there. But hopefully it's early enough that people can go and grab something afterwards if they want. No pressure to come, but we will be there. So yeah, we'll highlight that again, but just so everyone's aware. All right. So I think we'll get Grant to start first because the middle distance is first. So what I'll do, I'll just get up the link. Sorry, lost it. Oh, there it is. Might be a moment. So the first race is on the map called the Gib, which is a granite hillside. I guess, Grant, anything to start with that you have to add about granite terrain?
The Gib is a map that we used to, like when I was all your guys' age, we used to drive past it, wishing that it was an orienteering map. We used to drive past it all the time. And I only ever got to run on it when I was an old bloke. So I don't have the experience of running on it as a fast, agile person. But
You're still pretty damn. You were in the sprint final last weekend, Grant. Don't write yourself off.
Not particularly agile though. Yeah. So yeah, you guys, everyone will know what this sort of orienteering is like. It's no different to normal granite orienteering. And it's quite clear. Who set this course? Was it you, Aston, or Brody?
I think Aston set this one.
I think I set them. I set these also before I knew how far away the start is. So that is more than 30 meters climb, I think, from the arena.
Yeah, it's a lot more than 40 meters climb. It's a big hill. Well, it was for me as an old bloke. It's a big hill, but what you set there is using the terrain exactly how you should use this terrain. It's quite clear the western side of a hill is steeper and rockier and much more difficult to run on. The terrain is like my memory of it, there's a lot of fallen timber and that to jump over as well. I don't know if that was just me or not, but it was a bit rough going. But if I was to set a course in here, what I would want to do is get you going downhill into controls on the western side of a hill. That's clearly the most difficult thing on this map is downhill into the controls. Downhill, well, for a couple of reasons, because you're running faster and things are coming up faster at you. You don't see, when you're running downhill into the rocks, you don't get as good a picture of it as well. When you're coming up into it, generally you see the cliffs much clearer, and you can see the big detail much clearer from the bottom than you can from the top. And just running downhill, being a bit rough, you're looking at your feet, you're thinking about your ankles. Hopefully you're not thinking about that too much. I do it a lot. And because you've got those other things going on in your head, it's much, and you can run fast, like you're not tired, right? So you've got no excuse to stop, but it is really difficult running downhill into these controls. So it's a bit hard for me to see this course with my eyes. So
can you zoom it in a bit?
Yeah,
there we go.
Yeah, that's good. Like,
yeah.
So the other thing to be I would be thinking running here is, I've just done a whole heap of sprint orienteering. Sprint orienteering, it's very, like, maps are perfect. It's very clear. Every feature on a sprint map is defined, and you're making really fast decisions all the time, but they're simple decisions because everything's defined. Going to granite, and everyone's going to map granite terrain a little bit differently. You can't map it perfectly. So what you have to be thinking of is to get a picture of the terrain coming from multiple angles. So you don't only want to think of the next thing you're going to see in front of you. You want to you're thinking in a bit of a triangle. What's the thing I'm coming up ahead of me? What's the thing that's going to be on my left? What's the thing that's going to be on the right? And if you got sort of three things in your head that you're thinking you're going to see next, that's generally a good, if you see all those three things, how you want to see them, you're going pretty well. But quite often, you won't quite interpret everything the same way. So if you have multiple things you're thinking about the whole time, you can keep a straighter line to the control because you use that triangulation off the different objects, and that you are having multiple backups if you are misinterpreting things. Because if you look halfway along this leg, if you just go, you just run slightly left of the line through that clearing, and then you pop through a little bit of bush into open area, a semi-open area. Like at the start of a course, you're not going to know the difference between. You're not going to pick that up yet. You're not going to know what's a clearing, what's semi-open, what's bush. It'll take you a little while to work your way into that. So what I wouldn't be so much thinking about the vegetation as a concrete thing on this map. I would be clearly you just have to go straight to this. There's nothing other than straight to this leg, and I'd be mainly thinking of those lines of rocks off to the left that you just keep picking off, and a couple of clearings before you get into the control. If you're lucky, there's a big attack point to the left. You might, if you stick to the line, if you stick to the line, you'll probably see that if it's good visibility. The second leg, now that second leg's where you're going to get rough running, and look, that's just straight as well. You just have to go straight, and by here you're trying to work out how the mapper interprets this. Like there's a shitload of rock in there, right? And if you look at the map, they're just round boulders, round large boulders, and a exactly perfectly straight rock face. That's not how the map looks like in reality. Those boulders are going to be very different sizes, so it's hard, and that's when you're going to get knocked off. You're going to get into the green for the first time, a little bit of low visibility. I won't go. Can you zoom out again? I just have another. I don't want to bore you with all this, but things to think about on this map is when you get the long legs. If you go 1, 2, 3, there's a long leg coming back. Yep. When you get the legs across the side of a hill, so when you get the legs across the side of a hill, there's animal tracks. There's always going to be animal tracks that go roughly contour, little bit up, little bit down, contouring. So I'd say you really use them. But it's a little bit of an art to it. It's an art to knowing if you're using an animal track, you can't plan what you're going to see next as well, as if it's that beautiful open terrain and you're just running straight. So it's way faster to run on an animal track, but it's going to draw you offline. So really be aware. It's a little bit more about reactive orienteering in it, because you're going to have to, all right, now it's taking me down. What am I going to see now? If I'm going down a little bit, yep, I'm probably going too far down on this animal track. I'm going to have to start contouring until I bash through a bush until I hit another animal track. But you can save a lot of time by finessing your way through the terrain on all those unmapped things, animal tracks, vegetation where you, is that my email or is that someone else's?
That was mine, I think. Sorry.
Cool.
So while we don't have a map to look at, Grant, what about, we were talking about at the start, the hardest legs are, the down and across ones.
Yeah.
Do you have a plan? Do you drop straight down, follow a line? Do you run the same height and drop down? Do you diagonal it? What do you do?
I always run straight. Like there's no reason not to run straight in this area other than to run around things that are going to slow your running down. So if straight's going to be through a lot of rock, you run around the rock. You just clump the rocks into little bits. So it's generally clumping. You run between clumps of rocks, and then when you get in close to the circle, you start reading in much finer detail. I would definitely run green on that leg. I wouldn't bother climbing all the way up to the top, unless unless there are no animal tracks. But I can, it's Australia. It's a steep hill. It's steep for animals too, and they find the path of least resistance and will find those animal tracks. And just going, if you go on this leg, if you're going to go up, you definitely go over blue. You go on the top of those, on the top of it. Sorry, which way are we going?
I don't know.
But I'm talking, I would go straight
up.
if I was up the screen. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I'd take the green. You can pick up the clearings, you pick up the clumps of rocks, and you find animal tracks along the way. You have to be really bloody, you're killing yourself getting over that hill. Like that's a big climb.
But if you do climb up, like you said, you want to actually,
you want to go around it at the end. You don't want to, you don't want to diagonal down too early.
No.
Yeah, you got to commit to go the whole way.
Yeah, and that's what you can bet someone's gonna, like what I'll do now. I'll go, I'm going to go up, and I'll get halfway up the hill and go, nah, it's too hard. That's way too high, and then I'll contour, and you end up contouring through all the worst bits there. Yeah, so it's a micro route choice, but I think if you run the green well, that's way faster. But that's my style of orienteering. Yeah, I just straight is great. And
how about someone
maybe that's not the way. Yeah, that's sorry, Tash.
Oh no, I was just going to say perhaps someone with a little bit less, experience in this technical stuff. If you could remember back to when you perhaps weren't as good technically. I'm
no good technically anymore, but yeah, I just think about my feet all the time. But that next leg's a good one. That's a really good leg, and I've had a similar leg to that before. Going from the bottom up. So it's shithouse contouring that if you come in on the contour through all that green stuff there. When I ran, it was probably 5 or 6 years ago, but that was horrible. That green, what's green stripe stuff? Yeah, it's a good leg.
Probably like ferny stuff, if I remember right.
Yeah, or it's like that thicker grass. You get it at Birkenburn as well. Yeah, I would go slightly right of straight on this leg. You could go right. The only other option is to go right round the bottom. I think right round the bottom to the left, and it's probably an easier. So if you go right round the bottom to the left, you don't have much to orienteer on into the control, but you're going so slow up a hill, you'll be able to work it out, right? So if you're running up a hill, you might be tired, but you've got time to read things. So it's much to muchness. I just think, you're tough, you're fit, you're tough, you contour out of control, you run to the right of the leg, and you drop down right on the edge of your escarpment. But it's difficult.
What about entry on this one, Grant? What would you be thinking as you come over the top?
make sure you know, yeah, so just basically where, if you see the line, the last leg, the last sort of half of this green now, there's a line. There's where the purple line is, there's also a line of rocks there. So there's a line, a couple, starts with a couple of boulders, and you get the bare rocks. So that's a really good safety thing into it. And then it's going to be really hard from then on in. You want to get below the neck, on the edge of a circle, you go back clump of boulders, you want to get below that. And then once you get below there, you should see the thing that's just beyond the control, the big rock face. But it's not like, I just, when I orienteered here, I didn't find it as easy to interpret the map as other areas. And I don't know, that's just, you know, I was having a bad day and it was a bit wet or something, but I just found it was quite basic. You don't have the shapes were quite difficult to read for me. So
it is quite a tricky area, especially on, like you said, that west slope. I've definitely been lost there, you know, making the mistake of just running a leg thinking I roughly knew where I was and I'd find something and work it out, and I didn't, and I lost like 10 minutes or something, 8 minutes on a leg. So you really have to pick
especially
up
in
those
that hillside.
lines.
That hillside where that control is where people make a lot of mistakes. Yeah. It's, and if you go the left way, like you're actually down quite a long way in the yellow. And I think what people have done taking there, once you get about where the cursor is now, you think you'd be able to look up the hill and just see by the shapes of the rocks above you where you are. But I know people have made parallel mistakes in there before, like not going up too early, I think. Yeah, I think it was quite hard to because it's a very flat, I mean, there's no contour features on that hillside. And all of a sudden you go from very small, very big rocks to very small rocks after you get off there. So I think it was quite hard to come at it from that area. If you come up the right way, that's fine. You won't have any trouble coming into the control. It's just doing a parallel mistake's the problem there.
Yeah, I think you highlighted something there that's quite characteristic of this terrain, is that like it's like they're all very like a flat hillside that doesn't have a lot of contour definition, but where the contour definition is good, it's really useful because it's really obvious, I think, such as like that gully or even this gully, or as we're talking about over here, like this gully in between the rocks, like that one's maybe obvious-ish if you at least.
Yeah, but that one actually, I think, because if you're coming from that direction, Brody, if you're down lower, that isn't obvious at all. I think it's So, and there's someone's told me about that area before. I know. They made a big mistake there. So I guess that's another thing to note.
The gullies don't go the entire hillside sometimes. They sometimes look like they might, but then if you're too low, you might run straight past it if you're looking up. Like if you're running across here, you might not see this up here.
And the next day you'll get a lot of that, because that next day the gullies don't make sense in some of the areas. Like you'll get a gully that going downhill will branch into two separate gullies, which doesn't happen normally. But anyway, that's another map.
So what I'm hearing there is, say, from someone like me who quite often likes to go around, and I'm not necessarily saying I would or wouldn't, but you need a definite clear feature before you angle in. You want to be
before
dead
you
sure
go up,
before you come in,
And it might be hard to read that vegetation.
Yeah. And also, as you were saying, when you're crossing up over sort of the end of the spur line, knowing exactly sort of where you were when you crossed sort of, over the nose of the spur or whatever, so that
you're going to be an oxygen debt there, I suppose. It looks simple. You just stay on the top of the escarpment and just drop off it right into at the end of the control. But you could make a parallel mistake there, I suppose, if you're not thinking clearly.
Be sure you know where you are before you head down in.
Yeah, but don't make the mistake of doing half, like the same. You either go over the top or you go right round. You don't run through that hillside there. It's really, that hillside, I think, it's really steep and rough. It's not fast. Yeah. I don't know. Is there anything else you need to know about this terrain? It's pretty simple. It's pretty typical Australian granite. And Brody pointed out, yeah, there isn't much contour detail. Like if you think of Carly's Rocks, people have run there. From there, you can just run from creek to creek to creek, and then do the granite bit after. You can't really do that here. The contours are more subtle.
Yeah, I think it's similar to what most people probably would have run on last year at Mount Alexander's, a similar area in terms of Mount Alexander also has big long slopes, but Mount Alexander may have maybe a little bit more contour definition, I think, in places.
I think also the odd bigger feature in Mount Alexander, so you can sort of pick out big features easier.
Yeah, there's definitely some big stuff here, but I think it's a bit more, and it's super really useful when you get it. Like these ones, ones, like these bigger clumps, you can tell this is it. Like you said, this area or where that other control was before, in that area, it all looks similar but different, and it's hard to tell what's what.
Once you get in the middle of it, it's hard, but getting the group, getting that clump is easy. So I guess it's maybe about hard. The groupings. You can do it quite a fast speed, but when you need to get a control that's in the area, in one of these areas, you really need to slow it down and think about how you're entering the area, where you're coming into it, I guess, and what the control's actually on, I guess, is the other thing. So control descriptions maybe maybe be somewhat useful. I'm not sure in these areas. Yeah, really useful. Like sprint, I never even read control descriptions unless you're thinking one side of a wall or not. But here it really is, because once you get into those clumps, the visibility is really low too, because the boulders are big.
Yeah,
you can't see past the next boulder. So yeah, you'll get in there and you get swamped, and you see two big boulders, and you could be between any two boulders, right? So once you're in there, it's hard. Yeah, that's why it's really important to know where you go in, because once you get in, it's really hard to relocate.
Yeah, for sure. Cool.
So you're simplifying the clumps as you go through on the sort of the bigger, what is it, more the green orienteering part, and then as you're coming, you're knowing which part of the clump or your control is, and whether it's on the higher point or the lower point, or near the other side.
And the size even helps here, like 3 meter boulder. Yeah, oh right, yeah, cool.
Yeah.
That's
because you might not be able to tell, like that one might be, this one might be a 1 meter boulder, and this one might be a 3 or 4 meter boulder.
Okay, sorry, I got
All good.
Kids think it's hilarious.
Got some helpers.
So yeah.
Does anyone have any questions for Grant before we move on to Matt and talk about Birkenburn? Anyone got any questions for Grant?
Well, hey, I'm very happy to talk to anyone out there. I'm just got kids around me all the time and stuff, so I don't often go out of my way, but please come and chat to me, and I really enjoy it, talking to people about your training and your orienteering and stuff. So cool. I won't be at bloody whatever Capital Brewing Company. I used to go there a lot as a police officer, so it's a nice place. There's actually not many fights in that there, but
Well, we should be pretty safe at 6:15, hopefully.
Yeah. It's safe choice. Good safe choice.
It's Jock here. Can I just ask? G'day, Grant. Look, I just looking at this. It's bringing back sort of traumatic memories. That area to the downhill and to the right of that control on the screen at the moment, I have a recollection of that being really. Oops. No, where are we? Oh yeah, that area there. That was really strange. There was a lot of rock there. It was to be honest, it would have been very difficult to map, but I have it was hard to get through, and I thought there was
Yeah,
a lot
it's
more
rough,
rock
isn't
there.
it? It's really rough.
And I
roads.
think, yeah, that area is quite different in terms of vegetation, I think, because of the way it faces, I guess. It's not so much just eucalypt bush, it's like scrubby, rough open, I guess, which is what it shows, but it's really hard to get across. It's not fast and you can't see much still.
Yes, yeah,
And
I think
sometimes
it's hard to
you can see a long way in some areas, and I think you fall into a trap with that. You can see a few hundred meters and you think you might be able to pick something out a few hundred meters ahead, but you can't.
No.
Yeah, it's got
You
good
can't.
vision
It's
in the
too-
distance, but maybe
everything's-
not good short distance vision. Yeah.
Yeah, and everything's very similar, so it's really, yeah.
So again, being careful with height, you know, looking at that and knowing that you're only got to drop, a couple of contours, not a whole stack, and just being careful with the information you have got, I guess.
Yeah, I think I'd nearly attack this control by maintaining the same contour as best I could, hoping I would
Hope to
either
hit that,
see
yeah.
this, or if I didn't see that for some reason because all this looked the same, this, given it's sort of a bit of a spur and there's a bit more going on, hopefully that would be more obvious and that would be my last in to come down into the control.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
But it is, yeah, it's a contour leg essentially. You either drop a contour and run the contour, or run the contour and then drop at the end.
Yeah. There's no use climbing back out to go, fumble your way around.
Oh, thanks, Grant.
Tough.
Brilliant work, Grant.
Joe, do you have anything that you wanted to add about this particular area or granite terrain? Any thoughts or?
Yeah, hi everyone. I haven't run here for a few years, but I was sort of recalling when Grant was talking about running along that tricky western side of the hill where you can often pick up an animal track or something. And I remember those little patches of yellow along that western side were quite useful. They sort of stood out a bit, like especially where you get one with a rock or a cliff on the one end of it. They were quite
Yeah, you're right,
good.
Joe. That's really good. Yeah, I remember now.
Yeah, but yeah, I think that side of the hill is pretty rough. But we also, in the past, we've always had legs that get you up on top of the ridge where it's quite fast and you can really run along on quite quickly up the top, but then you often will have to drop back down into that really rough stuff. So I think what you were saying, Grant, was about being really sure where you go in back when you've been running fast in the yellow, just know exactly where you go back in before you drop back down into that rough stuff's pretty important. The big blobs of rock, I think they stood out quite well, and the bare rock is they're really useful features. I'd be looking out for the bare rock in the yellow too. Yep, thanks, Grant.
Yep.
I think you covered off on lots of important things there.
All right, great, thank you. Should we, Matt, are you ready to look at Sunday?
Yeah, for sure.
Matt, do you need me to share
I might
anything?
No, I'll even pretend to drive. How about that?
Okay, cool. I like that.
Okay, so we've been talking about the Gibbs. So I'd say the Gibbs are fairly it's quite different in character to sort of the next day. So the next day we're on to Birkenburn or Sandhills, which has various different names. I've even managed to find an old map of my own. So how about that?
Yeah,
Nice.
Unbelievable scenes. So the Gib, I would say, is a fairly decisions dense terrain. So you're going to be making, if you go more than 20 seconds without seeing another rock that you have to have a think about, or is this the right section of yellow, or is this the right cliff that I'm looking for? So that's one type of orienteering. So you need to be quite switched on, always keeping up with where you are and where you're going. The Sandhills or Birkenburn is a little bit different. So in character, the Gibbs are a big granite hill. The Sandhills it's a big spur gully map with some additional rock detail. So generally speaking, you'll have your control sites will likely be point features, likely be small cliffs or rocks. But the predominant, I guess, character of your orienteering is still going to be primarily focused on your spur galley orienteering. So that's sort of how I see this particular terrain. So this isn't the last time we ran here. I believe we last used in 2018 for the AC Long Distance Champs, which I managed to avoid. I don't know, weather mustn't have been very nice. But we also ran here in 2015. We had a NOL round as well. I had a quick read back of my notes of the course of the day and said rocky underfoot. So yeah, that's always a bit of fun as well. But then also one of my main comments was I sort of managed to, I guess, lose track of where I was, or sort of, be a bit unsure of where I was halfway through the leg on several occasions. And this is certainly the type of terrain which does lend itself towards that. I guess we'll talk through a couple of legs and sort of talk about, the sort of the characteristics of this sort of terrain and how sort of how best to go about it as well. So first leg, you get the map, you go, oh, great, cool, long leg. At the end of the day, most orienteering, and particularly in this sort of terrain, it's about how can I find this control. So we're looking for a control that's, I'm not sure if everyone can see it, but we're looking for a control which is a rock next to a creek. So great, shouldn't be too difficult to find once we get there. So then how are we going to be able to get to our attack point or our location as quickly as possible? So with long legs, it's quick scan left and right. Is there any good options that go around? I didn't see any, and I don't think there are. So then, how straight can we stay, but, maximizing our efficiency and running and avoiding bad areas. So, having a look at this leg, you don't really want to run down this rocky hill. You don't really want to run up this steep bit. So you got to try and avoid this, go left or right. Left, you seem to have more climbing. So we're going to try and stay right, and then sort of smooth out our climb. And then we get to the other sort of interesting part of the map, which Grant was alluding to before, is that there's quite flat sections on this map in the top of the hills. So, and this is where you can, as I said, lose your way. So different sections of these maps sort of require different skills. So, as you're coming across our flat sections, it's a good time to, sort of increase your compass work and sort of increase your, I guess, surety of where you are and where you want to go. Keep your direction, and then you have a few different options, which are probably much of muchness. You make decisions. You choose. Do you want to come down to number 6, trying to avoid the rocky ground? Always good to see a control before you go there as well. Never hurts. Or do you come up and around? I mean, this is, again, from here, what you're looking at is, again, more spur gully terrain. So it's important to, keep track of where you are, keep track of what you're doing. The only real dangers you run into in this sort of control site is looking too early or looking too late, or being in the wrong creek, obviously, but we'll try and avoid that if at all possible. So you want to be sure where you enter the creek, or where you are next to the creek, etc., and then find your control. Again, with a long distance sort of terrain, and this sort of course has been well set in that regard. You've got long legs mixed with short legs. So our next one is a relatively short control. We're going up the hill to find another gully. As with most short controls, there's nothing that gets in your way on the leg, so there's no real need to go offline. So make sure you take a good bearing, keep track of where you are and what you're looking for. You're looking for a small gully, and then find your control. And this similarly, so the next couple of legs, I guess, again, flirt with this sort of the characteristic of this sort of terrain, where you have sections where there's not a lot going on, followed by sections which are relatively detailed dense. So again, how are we finding this control? Well, have a look. There's nothing great immediately preceding, but let's say you want to see this gully, and then you should be, within striking distance of the control. So how are we going to get there as quickly as possible? well. From the looks of things, you want to stay relatively online. You know, you see your things you want to see along the way. So you want to see these cliff. You know, you want to be between sort of these hills or these sort of knolls, I guess. You want to see this knoll. You know, you want to see this sort of section. You want to cross the creek. You want to come up this gully, and then find your way in. So it's not super difficult in that regard. Like, it's not any terrain that is completely different to something you've done before. It's just about remaining sort of switched on, particularly through these flatter sections. So that's where you discipline in either your sort of compass direction and discipline in sort of remaining, I guess, committed to whatever route choice you've chosen for this particular leg. Yeah, similarly, again, long distance, you're going to get some legs which we're going to require some gratuitous climb. So you just got to do it. I mean, you can choose to come up the gully, but you're saving maybe 2 contours and running a lot further and putting yourself in a more difficult entry to your control. So my choice would be, you know, straight over the top, keep it simple. And then here you've reached another sort of difficult part of the leg, where, you know, it's crunch time. Like, if you start going down the wrong spur, you're going to have problems. So, you know, it's about taking your time when you're coming off the top of the hill here to, you know, really, you know, get your bearing and get it correct. Like, it's one of those skills that you can control. You can control the time you take to, yeah, I guess, commit and make your decision correctly. So, you know, it's important to do that and then execute your skill as necessary. And then once you're on the spur, you know, it's on the point of the spur. Like, it's not anything more than that. So the termite mound feature has been, you know, quote unquote updated since 2015 when this map was made. So now we've got little triangles, just in case that's going to confuse anybody. My thing with termite mounds in the ACT, I believe these ones weren't too bad, but they're more of a, only take them as positive. So if you see a termite mound and you expect to see the termite mound, great, add to the confidence. I wouldn't go out of my way to find one or be terribly concerned if I didn't see one. That's just my 2 cents on that. So 4 to 5 is another one of these ones which has this the characteristic of this terrain where they can be quite difficult to find your way across relatively flat and relatively vague sections. So yeah, as Grant was alluding to before, some of these gullies don't feel quite right. And that's where you can use your skills that you have to, you know, really focus on them for time that you need them to. So, you know, on this sort of leg 4 to 5, how am I going to find this control? Well, at the end of the day, it's on the top of the hill. So, yeah, as far as control sites go, it's not the worst. So how am I going to get or make sure that I am looking in the correct place, you know, without any fuss? So probably best in this particular scenario to either, you can choose to come a little bit higher and try and look for these rocks and potentially these termite mounds, despite the fact I just said you shouldn't look for termite mounds, but let's not worry about that. But the main thing is that you want to see the shape of these gullies so that you know what you're looking for. So in order to do that, we want to get to our little high point here. Then you'll see the shape of this gully, see the shape of the next gully, follow it up, and you're into your control. No worries. So leg 6 is, you know, again, similar to what we've discussed before. It's about, you know, controlling your skills, spur gully terrain, you know, keep your head up, keep looking ahead. 6 to 7 is one which is a little bit more interesting and will be potentially quite difficult. So I'm not sure if 7 invokes the same feelings of fear in me as it does everyone else, but you know, coming down to a point feature on a flat slope without many features before or after, you know, sort of rings alarm bells to me. And this is sort of control where you can really, this is ones where you should try and tell yourself in your mind, orienteering is a funny sport where you can't really make up time. But in my mind, if you find this control, you know, perfectly, quote unquote, or you find it with minimum fuss, you have made time. So that's, you know, that's as good as can be done. And you can reasonably expect many people won't do that. So this is a really good opportunity to yeah, I guess like, you know, improve, show your skills. So again, if we're looking at this sort of control, how are we going to find this control? Again, as I was saying, there's not a lot to go on. So what's the best thing to go on will be this gully here, and how are we going to get there the fastest from control 6? So control 6, you know, you probably will look to come through our saddle, come around the side of our hill, and then into this gully here. So again, you know, there's not a lot in your way to stop you. So, and there's nothing that will benefit you from going particularly offline. So you just try and find the best way you can, avoiding any particularly rocky ground to get to our saddle. You know, keeping an eye on the shapes, keeping an eye on your compass on the course. And then once you've reached the sort of the crux of the leg here, this is where, you know, I'll take the time. Again, as we were saying before, this is where you really got to commit and really show, you know, care and dedication to a particular skill. In this case, it will be, you know, your bearing from this. This is a 1:15 map, and I've blown it up a bit. This is approximately 300 meters, or at least 250, which will be, you know, about the absolute max you can expect from a bearing. Being generous here as well. Probably less is probably. I don't think I could get that far perfectly. But this is where you really got to, you know, really slow down, take your time, and really, you know, focus in. Like if you can see this additional vegetation detail, great, have a look for it. If you can see it, use that as an extra little bit of evidence to sort of point that you are going to the correct control. And yeah, hope for the best and cross your fingers. Keep looking, use your eyes. Hopefully there's some other people lost looking for it as well, and you can always use them to guide yourself in. Now, so that's this northern section of the map. Hopefully they don't send you, there is yet more to the north. However, it does go a little more flat. So this is probably the main section of the map. Again, as I was saying, it's mainly spur gully with steeper sections and more vague sections with additional rock detail. But you know, the overall character of the map is still a spur gully map, so with additional point detail feature. The southern section of the map, however, is a bit different. I'm not sure how much of this is or isn't going to be in use, but this changes character completely. So this is sort of where the Sandhills name comes from. So I believe back in the day they used to do sand mining or something like that. They certainly were mining something in the southern section down here. So in 2015, we did the middle distance on this southern section and the long distance the day after. And in 2013, we had the school's individual through here for those who want a history lesson with their orienteering. But yes, as I was saying, character very different. So, you know, you've just gone from a big spur gully map, you know, big hills, you know, rock, big climbs, to flat, a lot of green, a lot of point features that are, you know, man-made features, or, you know, dug up sand and dumped them somewhere else. So, you know, there's a bit of a change of pace, and it's certainly, you know, it's going to require, at the end of the day, like orienteering is orienteering. Like, you know, how do you do for orienteering? You know, think about how you're going to correctly find the control and how you're going to get from point A to point B fastest. But, you know, there are some sort of differences associated with this sort of orienteering that you do sort of need to take into account. So as I was harping on before, you know, this sort of terrain really does lend itself to that sort of skills-based orienteering, where you really got to commit to, you know, finding a feature, using your skills to quickly and correctly navigate from one feature to the next. So, you know, for instance, let's pick a good leg on this one. So actually 13 to 14 is quite a tricky one. So from memory, you know, these are relatively large features. So all these like sort of little mounds in here are of decent size, but you got to think, how am I going to get from, you know, this mound to that mound as quickly as possible? So if we sort of zoom in again, because this was a 1:15,000 map, just to, you know, do some ISART challenge while we're at it. You know, how are we going to find this? Well, you know, the road here is quite straight. There's a couple of bends, but that doesn't really help us too much. I guess, you know, the best way that I think would be to do this leg is, you know, exit, sort of keeping these mounds on my left. I sort of exit straight out to the road, hit the road, I mean, ideally you hit it, just next to this corner so you can see it. Have a look in, you see your mound, and this is where we sort of use a little bit of, I guess, estimation of distance to come off the road is quick, and then try and sort of use these lines of mounds in. So I guess as an additional feature, there's a little gully, or there's going to be a little creek to the north of the control, which you can have a sort of a sider on, see if that helps you if you don't sort of see it straight away, and then sort of follow your way in. I guess another good one would be 11 to 12, where there really isn't a lot to go on this sort of leg. But in reality, what you can do is sort of, sort of skirt the edges of things. So exit straight, use your compass, and really use your compass, focus on it, have a commitment to, sort of holding it. So you bring your compass across this terrain, see your termite mounds, see this dam, and then sort of keep coming across. So the only good thing with terrain like this, where there isn't a lot going on, is hopefully there isn't a lot going on. So you should be able to, there shouldn't be too many rocks, there shouldn't be too thick forest or anything. So you really should be able to hold your direction quite nicely through this sort of terrain. You're not going to get pushed by the slope. So, hold it, find your features, and then bring them in. I guess that's probably the main different skills in this sort of terrain. So we got our sort of northern section, as I was saying before, big spur gully, there is a lot of additional rock detail, but at the end of the day, it's a spur gully sort of map. And then in the south here, we have quite a flat, relatively low visibility, a lot of point feature terrain, which is something quite different, but it's a little bit more similar to some sections of sort of mining that exists in Ballarat, Bendigo sort of region as well. The only other thing I'll note is that in the notes in the bulletin, they do say something regarding a section of previously out of bounds terrain that has been mapped, which I assume is this, which looks like they have been doing some sand mining there as well. Which I think, if anyone wants to correct me, I think may have been pine forest plantation as well, maybe.
Yeah, there's some pine in there.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know if I was going to say, if they bothered to map it, then you can probably assume that there may be some controls in there, as an aside. But yeah, that's my main thoughts on this Birkenburn terrain, or renamed from Sandhill.
Yeah, some of those gullies that up near, on the way to 1 and 2, that sort of, they don't look quite straightforward, do they? So they're not just like Victorian, nice, straight up and over, gully through the saddle down the other side. So it is going to require concentration, like you said, not to sort of go a bit, off when you're running along those legs.
Yeah. So as I was saying, it's sort of because so gib, really high decisions. You got to make a lot of decisions all the time. This sort of terrain, there will be sections where there's 30 seconds to a minute where there's not really anything going on, and that's time where you can, I guess, lose concentration or sort of lose track of what you're trying to do, and that's it's always something really important to sort of catch yourself. I guess it's recognizing when you are making that, or that is happening, to have something in your head to refocus and sort of reaffirm what you're trying to do on this particular leg. As Tash was saying though, in sections like this where the gullies don't necessarily, was probably a good section. Yeah, in some places along here, like the gullies don't really lead in lines that you would normally expect. That's sort of the time to don't necessarily use them as linear features in the terrain. There's something to have a look at, and if they work, but your main sort of commitment is to sort of move across that terrain to, I guess, things that are a little bit more definite.
Yeah, and like you said, Matt, like coming over off that sort of spur, and I think to number 4, over the hill to number 4, just being really careful getting the right spur, and in the reverse, like on the funny gullies, just be really sure, check your compass, line your map up that you are in the gully you think you're in, because they go in all different directions.
You also get some pretty low visibility on that western side from memory, some like low wattles sort of stuff. So
I think this sort of stuff's pretty low visibility.
It's pretty tricky. Like gullies go everywhere, and yeah. But when you don't know, when there's nothing to read, there's nothing to stop you from running either. So if there's nothing to read, you just keep running straight.
If it was easy, anyone would do it.
That one down to 7.
Yeah.
What was it? That long one down to 7?
Yeah.
You can bet everyone's going to run down to there and stop and run and stop and run and stop and look at their map again and run and stop.
Yeah.
What are you going to read? What are you going to? Why are you stopping?
At the end of the day, have a think. As I was saying, like, is it 100 meters or is it 300 meters? Like, if it's 300 meters, don't. There's no reason to stop until you get to, about 300 meters.
Yeah, and throw your head around everywhere. Look.
Yes. On a swivel.
Behind you, look everywhere. Yeah.
Hey, Joe, have you got anything to add there? From the girls' side of thing, anything to add? Would you do the same sort of route choices or?
Yeah, I think so. I've just looking at this again. I've been reminded it is quite a challenging area, just with those gullies that aren't always linear. I think keeping a good eye on that is very wise. I seem to remember it's a bit easier running on the tops, like some of those ridge lines. It's easier physically running, but then you've just got to be super careful about staying on the correct spur off the top of those ridges, because you can get into yourself into
stay quite switched on to how far you've gone. When am I getting off this, or which spur am I going down next, etc. Yeah, for sure.
That's right. There's quite a lot of nice little distinctive knolls, like rocky knolls too, which are very helpful though when you're on those ridge tops. But, it's a pretty good area, pretty challenging, very physical. I think there's quite a bit of stuff on the ground too, and in those areas where there's just those little speckled rocky around everywhere. It is quite rough, so I guess just consider that in route choices. Those steeper slopes are pretty slow going.
Yeah, I think actually what Grant said at the very start when he was saying we've just spent a week sprint racing, and everything in a sprint race is definite. The building has a sharp, definite corner, and everything's on the map. Whereas this sort of stuff, it is the mapper's sort of interpretation and then how you see it versus how they see it. So just, I don't know what I'm going to say about that. Just be, I guess, careful and, just realise not everything's definite. So,
might just pipe up a little bit on speaking of mappers. I believe my dad mapped quite a bit of this, and I think he's mapped that new Pine area. And I think his style is he maps a lot of detail. So I guess being aware of
that's
that.
good to know.
Yeah, simplifying is going to be important, but he's got a lot of attention to detail. So
yeah. That's good to know. Thanks, Joe. Has anyone got any questions for Matt or Grant or Joe? Anything they want to add?
Jock again. Matt, thank you very much for that and for your thoughts to Joe and Tash. But I'm looking at the start to number 1 and I'm not showing much imagination with this suggestion. You just explain it back out again. Is there a reason why you wouldn't just head west from the start to the fence, run down the fence, and then basically head north across to the next fence up there and run along? Because there's avoiding 50 meters.
I did see somebody's GPS track, which managed to come out through the descriptions here and then back on.
I wasn't actually suggesting going off the map.
No. Yeah, I mean, there certainly is a valid option. Like for me, like personally, I don't. Having run here, like I know it is quite fast through all this. So like these top sections here are, relatively speaking, quite quick. So, the additional, it's not quite a 3, 4, 5 triangle, but it's not so far off that either. For me, the additional distance. and like it's pretty, like from memory, like this green was pretty bad.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, like it's certainly something, like particularly early in a course, like that's always an option. You know, it is a safe option. You know, put your head down and then, you know, run. As you say, like it is saving you probably quite a bit of climb at the end of the day. How many is that?
It's at least 50 meters.
Yeah,
But
high.
you're going up and down a bit, Jock, as well, and it's much
Yeah.
slower running there. And
Right,
you just
okay.
the other thing is,
I mean,
like it's I think you should try and get into the orienteering at the start as well, because that just gives you a like you might tire yourself out running to. I just think at the start of a map, don't be afraid to get into the orienteering. Just go for it. I don't think you're saving any navigational aid, but I think it's more difficult going to the west, basically.
Okay, as you said,
It's
I remember
more,
just
it's more difficult because lower visibility. You got a harder attack point. You got rougher running.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just remember that spur around 6, and that I have vague recollections of just how rocky and rough that is. And I have vague ideas that actually following a creek down was actually easier than staying on the spurs sometimes. I mean, not being in the creek, but having the creek as a handrail.
Yeah, if you have those rocky grounds, you avoid
Yeah.
them. You sort of run around the little patches of rocky ground, and I think it's quite good running on the ridges otherwise. But it's easy to get drawn away parallel, come off the wrong ridge. So coming down from 6 in, it would be quite easy to get sucked in and going down, falling a little bit south of the control there, I think.
Yes.
So perhaps from all of that, because, you know, I also have slightly different sort of, I guess, view on what I would do, but I think that it's good for everyone that's listening, especially the younger orienteers, to realise that there is not just one perfect way. Everyone has their strengths. So some people that are, you know, really strong and good technical orienteers will more often go straight. Those that are perhaps not as technically sound, or you know, there's nothing wrong with going wide. If you see a way that you like the look of, you think it's going to be easy for you, and you know, go for it. You don't think while you're out there, oh my goodness, everyone else goes straight, I have to go straight, and you do something you're not comfortable with, and you end up, you know, losing time and losing confidence. Stick with, you know, I guess what you can do, and slowly evolve your navigation. I mean, Grant and Matt are amazing orienteers, have been doing it for a long time, and they sort of know the fastest way to get there for them. So yeah, take it all on board and do with it what you want, I guess.
Yeah. I guess the main thing is, it's just have a look at things. Pitfalls to avoid is, you know, don't try and run down a rocky spur on the straight line.
Yeah.
You know, don't try and go straight over the hill and then come down through here. You know, all sorts of things. Like there's always going to be more than one way to skin a cat. And like it might well be for you, or I mean, I didn't test it with anyone else. I went straight and that worked for me, but yeah, it's not going to work for everyone. So, and it's pretty long leg. It was like 20, no, maybe not that many. Like, so this is one that's for 15. So I think it may have almost been 20-minute leg. So, you know, like it's quite a significant proportion of your course from memory. So yeah, make of that what you will.
Yeah. I was going to Jock again. I just go, as a course setter, sort of philosophically, I don't like putting such a long leg on the first control, knowing that a lot of people won't have had a chance to get into the terrain, and some people may have been in the terrain and some people will not have, and they won't have an opportunity to judge where the best running is. I think that's actually a little bit unfair for the course setter to do that. But you may get that may still happen on Sunday, and you'll have to just get on with it. So, okay.
Yeah, I agree.